So beautiful.
Oh,
I don't know. I wasn't expecting that one. Yeah, it's just so great. This is why it's so nice to not have makeup on. At 7:48 this morning, Prince William issued a statement so direct, so uncompromising, that even those closest to the royal family momentarily stopped what they were doing. The future relationship between the Crown and the Duchess of Sussex has been conclusively determined. There will be no pathway for return. 19 words that didn't simply close a door. They sealed it permanently. The statement that shattered silence. The confirmation arrived without the usual diplomatic softening that typically cushions royal announcements. It came through Kensington Palace's official channel, bearing William's name directly, a rarity that immediately signaled the gravity of what was being said. Within seconds, the statement began its journey across the world, lighting up newsrooms, vibrating phones, and triggering a cascade of reactions that stretched from London to Los Angeles. What made this moment so profoundly different from every previous royal statement about the Sussexes was not just the finality of the language, it was who delivered it. William had remained strategically silent through years of controversy, allowing the institution to speak through carefully crafted palace bulletins. But today, he stepped forward personally. And when the future king speaks in his own voice about a matter this sensitive, the world understands immediately that something irreversible has occurred. BBC interrupted its scheduled programming within 3 minutes. The anchor, a veteran royal correspondent who had covered the family for nearly 30 years, read the statement twice before looking directly into the camera and saying simply, "This is unprecedented. The Prince of Wales has just confirmed that Meghan will never return to the royal fold in any capacity." The weight of those words hung in the studio air like frost. Sky News pulled together an emergency panel. Analysts sat in stunned silence for a moment before one of them, a former palace press secretary, spoke what everyone was thinking. William doesn't speak unless the matter is beyond negotiation. This isn't a warning. This isn't a boundary. This is a verdict. Across the Atlantic, where the East Coast was just beginning to stir in the pre-dawn darkness, news alerts lit up millions of screens. CNN's breaking banner scrolled with stark simplicity. Prince William confirms no return for Meghan Markle. CBS described it as the most definitive royal statement in modern memory. And on social media, within 15 minutes of release, the confirmation had been shared more than 200,000 times. Outside Kensington Palace, journalists who had been stationed there for routine coverage found themselves suddenly at the centre of a historic moment. One reporter, standing in the cold December morning air, described the scene to her camera crew. "You can feel it in the atmosphere here. This isn't speculation anymore. This isn't palace insiders suggesting possibilities. This is William, the future king, personally confirming that a former working royal will never be welcomed back. That has never happened before, not in this way." Inside the palace walls, senior staff moved through their duties with an almost eerie calm. They had known this confirmation was coming. They had helped draft the language, refine the tone, and prepare for the inevitable storm that would follow. But seeing it released, seeing William's name attached to words that would fundamentally alter the monarchy's relationship with one of its most controversial figures brought a sobering clarity to the day. What struck many observers, particularly those who had covered the royal family through decades of scandal and reconciliation, was the absence of any hedge language. Previous statements about the Sussexes had always included phrases like, "at this time," or "currently," or "under present circumstances." This one contained none of that. It stated plainly that there would be no pathway for return using future tense that eliminated any possibility of reinterpretation. For older viewers in Britain, especially those who remembered the tumultuous Diana years and the eventual reconciliations that followed various royal crises, William's confirmation felt almost shocking in its permanence. The monarchy had always left doors slightly ajar, always maintained the possibility that time and circumstance could heal what conflict had broken. But not today. Today, William had personally ensured that this particular door would remain closed, locked, and never reopened. In the United States, where Meghan's story had always carried deeper cultural resonance, the reaction was immediate and divided. Morning show hosts debated whether William's confirmation was justified institutional protection or cruel family rejection. Social media erupted with both support and condemnation. But beneath the noise, one truth was undeniable. The future King of England had just publicly, personally, and permanently severed any possibility of Meghan's return to royal life. What exactly had pushed William to take this extraordinary step? What pressures, provocations, and breaking points had accumulated to force a man known for his careful deliberation to speak so directly? So finally, the answer lies not in a single moment, but in months of escalating tension that finally reached a threshold even William's legendary patience could no longer absorb. The pressure that built through autumn. To understand why William felt compelled to issue today's confirmation, we must look back at the autumn months of 2024, when a series of escalating pressures converged to create a situation the palace could no longer manage through silence or diplomacy. Because William's statement this morning was not an impulsive reaction, it was the culmination of careful deliberation pushed to its breaking point. Throughout September and October, Catherine had become increasingly troubled by a pattern she could no longer dismiss as coincidence. Every time she launched a major initiative, every time she appeared at a significant engagement, articles would surface within days suggesting internal conflict, staff dissatisfaction, or personal struggles. The articles never cited credible sources. They relied instead on vague phrases like palace insiders, those close to the situation, but their timing was too precise to be accidental. During a private meeting at Kensington Palace in early November, Catherine finally voiced her concern directly to William. "Someone is coordinating this," she said quietly, reviewing a timeline that showed 10 separate negative articles appearing within 48 hours of her major announcements over the previous 3 months. This isn't organic media coverage. This is strategic interference. William had suspected as much for weeks, but hearing Catherine articulate it with such clarity hardened something inside him. His wife had spent years building a reputation grounded in service, dignity, and genuine commitment to causes she cared deeply about. Watching her work be consistently undermined by what appeared to be coordinated media manipulation was no longer something he was willing to tolerate. King Charles, meanwhile, was facing his own mounting frustrations. Throughout October, he had received multiple briefings showing that Sussex-related media cycles were consuming disproportionate amounts of palace resources. Communications teams were spending hours each week responding to false narratives. Legal advisors were reviewing potential defamation issues. Security teams were assessing risks created by inflammatory social media content. And through it all, Charles was trying to navigate the early years of his reign while managing health concerns that required more rest and less stress than his schedule typically allowed. During one particularly difficult conversation at Clarence House, Charles admitted to a trusted aide that he felt trapped between his love for Harry and his responsibility to the institution. "I want to believe reconciliation is possible," he said wearily, "but I cannot allow that hope to paralyze the monarchy's ability to function." The turning point came in mid-November with a security briefing that shook even the most experienced palace officials. Intelligence services had identified a concerning pattern of online activity targeting Catherine specifically. While most of it fell into the category of typical social media hostility, some content had crossed into territory that required formal assessment. Threats were being monitored. Misinformation campaigns were being tracked, and the volume of coordinated negative messaging had reached levels that security professionals described as unprecedented for a working royal in the digital age. William received this briefing in a small, secure room at Kensington Palace. He read through the documentation slowly, his face growing darker with each page. When he finished, he looked up at the security director and asked one question: "How much of this traces back to pro-Sussex accounts?" The answer, delivered carefully but honestly, confirmed what William had suspected: a significant percentage, but perhaps the most damaging pressure, came from international partners. The Foreign Office had been receiving discreet inquiries from diplomatic counterparts in Washington, Ottawa, and Canberra. The questions were always phrased delicately, but the concern was clear. The ongoing Sussex drama was complicating the monarchy's ability to serve as a stabilizing cultural and diplomatic force. One senior American official speaking off the record had apparently told a British counterpart, "We need to know if the Crown is stable enough to be a reliable partner. Right now, we're not certain." That feedback reached William through official channels in late November. For a man who understood that his future role would require maintaining complex international relationships built on trust and consistency, the message was devastating. The Sussex situation wasn't just creating tabloid headlines anymore. It was undermining Britain's soft power on the world stage. Anne, observing all of this with her characteristic clear-eyed pragmatism, finally told William directly what she had been thinking for months. "You cannot protect everyone. At some point, you must choose between the individual who keeps creating instability and the institution that serves millions. That choice should not be difficult." As November drew toward December, William found himself surrounded by evidence that could no longer be ignored. Coordinated attacks on his wife, strain on his father's health, security concerns that required constant monitoring, diplomatic complications that threatened Britain's international standing. Each pressure point alone might have been manageable. Together, they formed a picture that demanded decisive action. And so, as winter settled across London and the palace prepared for what should have been a peaceful holiday season, William made his decision. The time for hoping circumstances would improve had passed. The time for drawing permanent boundaries had arrived. The 4 decisions that led here. The path to William's confirmation this morning was not shaped by a single dramatic moment, but by 4 critical decisions made over the course of 6 weeks. Each decision built upon the last, each one moving the palace closer to the irreversible statement released at 7:48 today. The first decision came from Princess Anne during a private meeting with William in mid-October. They met in the library at Windsor, a room where Anne had often counselled William during difficult periods of his life. She did not soften her message. The institution requires formal boundaries, she told him, not suggestions, not hoping for improvement. Formal, documented, legally sound boundaries that cannot be misinterpreted or negotiated. Anne explained her reasoning with the precision that had defined her decades of royal service. Without clear boundaries, she argued, every future interaction with the Sussexes would become a negotiation. Every statement would be passed for hidden meanings. Every silence would be interpreted as either weakness or hostility. The only way to end the cycle was to establish formally and publicly what relationship would and would not exist going forward. William listened carefully. Anne's perspective carried weight, not because she was harsh, but because she was right. The monarchy had spent 4 years managing the Sussex situation reactively, responding to each new development as it arose. That approach had created constant instability. Anne was proposing something different, proactive clarity that would end the ambiguity once and for all. The second decision came from the palace's legal team in early November. They had been conducting a comprehensive review of potential future risks associated with continued Sussex ambiguity. Their findings, presented in a confidential briefing to William and Charles, were sobering. Without a clearly defined relationship status, the palace faced ongoing exposure to multiple categories of risk. Legal risks if the Sussexes made claims about informal agreements or expectations. Security risks if their status remained undefined during international visits. Reputational risks if their commercial activities created conflicts with royal associations, and constitutional risks if questions arose about their standing during future succession transitions. The legal director summarized it bluntly. Your Royal Highness, the longer this ambiguity persists, the greater the institutional vulnerability becomes. We strongly recommend formalizing the separation in terms that eliminate future disputes about standing, access, or association. William reviewed the legal assessment over several days. The conclusion was inescapable. Maintaining vague boundaries out of hope for eventual reconciliation was actually creating more risk than a clean, definitive separation would. It was a painful realization, but it was also clarifying. The third decision emerged from an unexpected source: the Foreign Office. In late November, a senior diplomat requested an urgent meeting with palace officials. The message delivered was diplomatic in tone, but unambiguous in content. Britain's international partners needed confidence that the monarchy was stable and focused. The ongoing Sussex drama was eroding that confidence. The diplomat presented polling data from key allied nations. In all of them, awareness of royal family dysfunction had increased significantly over the past year. More troubling, confidence in the monarchy as a stabilizing institution had decreased among opinion leaders and policymakers, the very people whose support mattered most for diplomatic relationships. The Foreign Office wasn't demanding any specific action, but they were making clear that the Sussex here, that the situation had moved beyond being a family matter. It had become a foreign policy concern, and that meant the government politely but firmly expected resolution. William understood the implication immediately. His future role would require managing complex international relationships during an era of global instability. If diplomatic partners questioned whether he could manage his own family dynamics, they would question whether he could be trusted with larger responsibilities. The personal had become political in a way that could no longer be ignored. The fourth and final decision was the most personal. It came not from advisors or institutions, but from within William himself. Throughout November, he had watched Catherine navigate increasingly hostile media coverage with grace and strength. He had watched his father struggle under the weight of unresolved family conflict while trying to establish his reign. He had watched his children grow up in an atmosphere where their family was constantly dissected by strangers. And at some point during those long November weeks, William reached a threshold he had not known existed until he crossed it. He realized that his responsibility to protect his immediate family, his wife and children, had to take precedence over his hope for reconciliation with his brother and sister-in-law. It was not a choice he wanted to make, but it was a choice circumstances had forced upon him. During a private conversation with Catherine in late November, he voiced what he had finally accepted. "I cannot fix this," he told her, "and continuing to try is harming the people I can protect." Catherine, who had never once asked him to choose, simply took his hand and nodded. She understood what that admission had cost him. These 4 decisions, each one building upon the others, created the foundation for what William would confirm this morning. Anne had provided the strategic framework, the legal team had provided the institutional justification, the Foreign Office had provided the diplomatic necessity, and William himself had provided the personal resolve. By the time December arrived, the decision was no longer whether to act, but how to communicate what had already been determined. The emergency summit. The meeting that would finalize William's confirmation took place on the evening of December 1st, inside a small private study at Windsor Castle. The room was cold, despite the fire burning in the hearth, and the December darkness pressed against the windows like something tangible. This was not a gathering of the full royal family. This was a strategic council, limited to those who would have to defend and implement whatever decision emerged. William arrived first, as he often did. He carried a single folder containing the draft statement his team had prepared. He had read it countless times over the previous 48 hours, refining words, testing implications, ensuring that every phrase carried exactly the meaning he intended. This statement would have his name attached to it. It would define his approach to family conflict for the rest of his reign. It had to be right. Charles entered quietly, looking older than he had just weeks earlier. The weight of the decision ahead showed in his face, in the way he moved, in the heaviness of his breathing. He sat without speaking, and William recognized immediately that his father was struggling. This was not merely an institutional decision for Charles. It was a father watching his son's relationship become irreparable, and knowing he could not stop it. Princess Anne arrived next, her presence as steady as winter stone. She had advocated for this moment longer than anyone. She believed deeply and without reservation that institutions survived only when they protected themselves from continuous disruption. Personal feelings, however valid, could not be allowed to paralyze necessary action. Then Catherine entered, and her presence shifted something in the room. She rarely participated in these strategic meetings. Her role had always been to support William privately while maintaining public focus on her own work. But tonight, William had asked her to be here, and she had agreed, understanding that whatever was decided would affect not just the institution, but their family directly. William opened the meeting with characteristic directness. Before we proceed, I need everyone to understand that the decision we make tonight will be permanent. There will be no softening later, no revisiting it when emotions cool. This must be final. Charles shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Anne nodded once, her expression unchanged. Catherine remained still, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze steady. William continued, I have reviewed every alternative, private communication through intermediaries, formal mediation, gradual boundary setting, time-based reassessment. None of them address the core problem, which is that the current ambiguity creates constant instability that affects our ability to function. He slid the draft statement across the table. Charles read it slowly, then passed it to Anne, who read it more quickly before passing it to Catherine. When all three had reviewed it, silence settled over the room. Catherine spoke first, her voice quiet but clear. This will hurt Harry deeply. You know that. William met her eyes. I do know that, but I also know that continuing as we have been hurts you, hurts our children, and hurts the institution my father has entrusted to us. I cannot keep choosing the possibility of reconciliation over the reality of protection. Charles's voice, when he finally spoke, was thick with emotion. William, I understand the necessity, but this feels like closing a door that should remain open, however slightly. Father, William replied gently, that door has been used as a weapon. Every time we leave it open, it becomes another opportunity for instability. I am not closing it out of anger. I am closing it because it is the only way to move forward. Anne interjected with her characteristic bluntness. Charles, you cannot govern a monarchy by hoping family dynamics will magically improve. William is doing what you taught him to do, putting the institution first, even when it costs him personally. The room fell silent again. Catherine reached across the table and gently touched the draft statement. The language is clear, she said. It doesn't attack anyone. It simply states what will be. That is the right approach. Charles leaned back in his chair, his eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, he looked at his eldest son with an expression that carried decades of complicated history. You have my support, he said quietly. Not because I want this, but because I trust your judgment. William felt something tighten in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. Then we proceed. The statement will be released tomorrow morning at 7:48. It will carry my name directly, and it will end the uncertainty. The meeting concluded shortly after. As the others left, William remained in the study staring at the draft statement. In a few hours, these words would reshape his family, his future, and the monarchy's relationship with its most controversial former member. But he had reached the point where certainty, however painful, felt less damaging than continued ambiguity. Catherine paused in the doorway, looking back at her husband. "You are making the right choice," she said softly, "even though it doesn't feel that way." William nodded once, then returned his gaze to the document that would change everything come morning. The confirmation and immediate aftermath at precisely 7:48 on the morning of December 2nd, the statement went live. The future relationship between the Crown and the Duchess of Sussex has been conclusively determined. There will be no pathway for return. Kensington Palace released it simultaneously across all official channels, and within seconds, the world began to react. In California, where night still clung to the coastline, the notification reached Harry's phone at 4:48 in the morning. He woke to the vibration, read the statement in the darkness, and felt something inside him break. This was not palace bureaucracy speaking. This was his brother. His brother, using his own name, personally confirmed that Meghan would never be welcomed back into the family. Sources close to Harry described his reaction as devastated silence. He did not wake Meghan immediately. He simply sat in the dark, holding his phone, trying to process what William had done. When dawn finally came, when he finally showed Meghan the statement, her response was measured. She had prepared herself for many outcomes, but this one, delivered so personally by William, felt like a final judgment she had not fully anticipated. Back in London, the palace machinery moved with practiced efficiency. Communications teams fielded hundreds of inquiries within the first hour. Legal teams confirmed the statement's implications. No future collaboration, no ceremonial role, no pathway for institutional return under any circumstances. Security teams adjusted protocols based on the new defined relationship status. Inside Kensington Palace, William went about his morning duties with outward calm. Staff who saw him noted that he seemed neither triumphant nor sorrowful. He simply seemed resolved, as if he had crossed a threshold that could not be uncrossed and had accepted the finality of it. Catherine maintained her scheduled engagements, offering no public comment on the statement. But those who worked closely with her observed a subtle shift in her demeanor. She seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight she had been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Princess Anne, when asked by a journalist for comment during a public comment appearance, offered only a slight smile and the words, "The statement speaks for itself." It was pure Anne saying everything by saying almost nothing. Charles spent the morning in private meetings, emerging only for necessary official duties. Those closest to him reported that he seemed sorrowful, but accepting. He had authorized William's decision, even though it pained him personally, and now he was living with the consequences of that authorization. Across British media, the reaction was swift and largely supportive. Commentators praised William for providing clarity. Editorials argued that the monarchy needed definitive boundaries to function effectively. Even outlets that had been sympathetic to Meghan acknowledged that William's statement ended years of exhausting speculation. In the United States, the response was more conflicted. Morning shows debated whether William had been justified or cruel. Social media erupted with hashtags supporting both positions. But beneath the noise, a consensus emerged. Whatever one's sympathies, William's confirmation had fundamentally altered the landscape. This was no longer a paused relationship. It was a conclusion. By midday, palace officials confirmed that no further statements would be issued. The matter, as far as the Crown was concerned, was closed. Meghan's future would unfold entirely separate from the royal institution. And William, having made the most difficult decision of his public life, had drawn a line that would define his leadership for decades to come. What this means for Meghan's future. As the December daylight faded over London and the full weight of William's confirmation began to settle, a stark reality emerged for Meghan Markle. The future she may have imagined, the one where time and circumstance could eventually heal what conflict had broken, no longer existed. William had not simply closed a door. He had confirmed that no door would ever open again. The practical implications are immediate and severe. Without any formal relationship to the Crown, Meghan loses access to the security coordination that comes with royal association. International travel becomes more complicated. Commercial activities must be navigated without any institutional guidance or protection. And the possibility of participating in any future royal events, even those involving her own children during significant family moments, has been explicitly eliminated. Financial implications follow close behind. While Meghan and Harry have built independent income streams through media deals and public speaking, the complete severing of royal ties removes certain protections and considerations they may have relied upon. Contracts that assumed potential future royal involvement must be reassessed. Partnership opportunities that banked on maintaining some connection to the institution have lost their foundation. But perhaps most significantly, William's confirmation removes any strategic ambiguity Meghan might have used in her own narrative building. She can no longer position herself as someone who might return if circumstances changed. She can no longer suggest that reconciliation remains possible, if only the institution would show flexibility. The future king has personally, publicly stated that no pathway exists. That statement becomes the historical record, and no amount of media campaigning can alter it. For those who have followed Meghan's journey, this moment represents something profound. She came into the royal family as an outsider, who believed she could modernize an ancient institution. She left when that belief collided with immovable tradition. And now William has confirmed that the departure is permanent, that the institution has moved forward without her, and that it will continue to do so regardless of what she says or does. Yet there is a lesson in this finality that reaches beyond one woman's royal experience. It speaks to a truth about institutions and individuals that history has demonstrated repeatedly. When personal vision conflicts fundamentally with institutional structure, one of them must bend or break. Meghan chose not to bend. The institution chose not to break. And William, as its future guardian, has confirmed that choice with devastating clarity. From my own perspective, watching this unfold, I find myself thinking about the nature of irreversible decisions. We spend so much of our lives hoping that doors remain open, that possibilities stay alive. That time will heal what conflict has wounded. But sometimes the kindest thing anyone can do is stop pretending reunion is possible and start accepting what actually is. William's confirmation was not an act of cruelty. It was an act of clarity. For years, the ambiguity surrounding Meghan's status created constant turmoil. Every statement was analysed for hidden meanings. Every silence was interpreted through competing narratives. Every family moment was overshadowed by speculation about whether reconciliation might be approaching. That exhausting cycle has now ended. For the monarchy, William's decision marks a turning point in how it handles internal conflict in the modern era. Previous generations might have allowed ambiguity to persist indefinitely, believing that time and discretion would eventually resolve tensions. But William understands that in the digital age, ambiguity is not protective, it is corrosive. And so he has chosen a different path, one that prioritizes institutional stability over personal comfort. For Meghan, the path ahead is now entirely her own to define. She can build a life focused on the causes she cares about, free from institutional constraints, but also free from institutional support. She can tell her story without wondering whether the palace might respond. She can make choices without calculating how they might affect a relationship that no longer exists. That freedom comes with a cost, but it is freedom nonetheless. As December settles over both London and California, one truth stands absolute. William has confirmed what many suspected but few dared to state plainly. Meghan's royal future ended not gradually, but definitively, not with continued negotiation, but with a final verdict. And that verdict, delivered personally by the future king, carries a weight that no amount of time or circumstance will diminish. The lesson for all of us, watching from whatever corner of the world we occupy, is achingly simple. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stop hoping for what cannot be and start building what actually can. William has made that choice for the institution he will one day lead. Meghan must now make it for the life she will continue to live. And all of us, whether we sympathize with one side or the other, must eventually make it in our own lives when faced with doors that will not reopen no matter how long we wait. Thank you for staying with this story to its conclusion. In the end, William's confirmation was not about judgment or punishment. It was about accepting that some separations must be permanent for everyone involved to move forward. The Crown has accepted it. Now the world must accept it too.